I guess the other thing too is I want people to understand that this really can happen to anybody. You know, we don't fit that kind of cliched stereotype that I probably had in my head before this happened to us, where it happens in some rough part of town by people who don't know how to behave themselves, who come home from work, have a few drinks, and beat up their wife. She was really on her way in all kinds of ways. But the part missing was her parents, my wife and I, didn't know about domestic violence really beyond the cliches and things, figuring it would never touch our lives. And of course, it did in a very, very big way. But it can happen to anybody in any neighborhood, anywhere around the world.
Welcome to the Persistence U podcast with Lisbeth. That's you as in university, but we're really much more of a community here. Lisbeth Meredith is an author, speaker, and online teacher. Each week, she'll be delivering amazing stories from survivors and strivers, all threaded together with a dose of persistence. We're so glad you're listening.
For sisters and brothers, I am really looking forward to this conversation with a passionate father about the love that he has for his daughter, as well as what he has done in her memory after she became a domestic abuse casualty, a casualty of dating violence. And this was more than a decade ago. But Bill Mitchell will never forget, and he will not let us forget, about the beauty of his daughter and also things that we can learn to improve our response when we see or suspect that a young person is the victim of dating violence. This may be hard for some people to hear as we talk about serious subjects, but I am committed to, I have loved a true crime space, but I'm all about true resilience and talking to people who've allowed their pain to transform their actions and make the world a better place and not live under a painful rock, which who wouldn't blame a parent for doing that, but for also experiencing joy and connection and purpose. So I'm really thankful that he's giving of his time. He's written a book, When Dating Hurts. And I'm telling you, as far as I've gotten so far, I love it. It is really, really good. How are you? And how is your week and summer going? It is July the 8th. As I record this, I'm anticipating my oldest daughter's first visit to see me in the South. We've seen each other even recently, but she's always met up with me some other place. So she's flying all the way from Alaska to hang out with her mom, and we're going to go on a road trip. Really excited. We are looking forward to going to South Carolina, a place, frankly, I've never been, but she has, and just hanging out and enjoying time and enjoying some squabbles, no doubt, and lots of just fun, real life. I miss her so much. So, yeah, I'm a very lucky mom. I hope you are enjoying the podcast, and I have more and more compelling guests coming for you. And at this point, we're basically almost at episode 170. So thanks for being here all. And it is always about healing, resilience, and sometimes our bumps in the road. Hope you feel less alone when you hear other people struggle who may have had something similar happen to you. Let me know, and don't forget to connect at lameredith.com or share the podcast. Find me on Facebook, my author page, and I will bring Bill on. Bill Mitchell, thank you so very much for being here today on Persistence U with Lisbeth. I have looked forward to this, and I gave the listeners and the audience, it'll be on YouTube as well, a brief introduction to you, but before we jump in, what did you do professionally? And you're a dad and all the things. Tell us a little bit about you before we get to the heart of the matter.
Yeah. So, well, professionally, I was a creative person in the advertising business most of my career. I started out as a graphic designer, then I switched over and was an art director in advertising. So it amounts to something like 42 or 3 years totally. So I'm one of the guys who would come up with print ads and TV spots and radio spots, all those things. So you think of advertising, I did I touched just about everything for almost any client you could mention in terms of types of clients and all. So it's you've seen TV shows about advertising agencies, and a lot of it rings true. Not so much the drinking in the middle of the day part that we didn't do. Wouldn't get anything done the rest of the day, of course. But yes, so that was a real it was a good direction to go. It's not for the faint of heart, I can tell you.
Right. Right.
Hmm.
Actually, life is not for the faint of heart. I would.
After a while, yeah, you're right. It does have some downs to the ups.
Oh my. Oh my. But I really, like I said, I appreciate your work. Back in the 90s, I was a domestic violence survivor advocate. We'd go to schools and talk about dating violence.
Yes.
And we were as welcome as you would be if someone was talking about birth control or something like that in the classroom. People had such strong feelings about kids and what should we be talking to them about and all of that. And I kind of understand, but tell me a lot about your foray into doing this, talking about this most important topic.
Yes, of course. So, Elizabeth, would you like me to go all the way back to why we even did this in the first place? Because I wouldn't have picked it had a tragedy not taken place.
Oh, please.
So if we do a double back flip quite a ways to May 14th, 2005, my daughter graduated from St. Joseph's University just outside of Philadelphia. She was in food marketing. She had a job lined up with General Mills, and that was the job everybody in food marketing wanted back in those days. So she got that job, and she couldn't have been more happy about it. The graduation day, she probably never looked more radiant, never looked more like a grown-up woman, 21 years old. But I mean, I'd seen her as a kid in high school, and of course, from the time she was born. But I remember pulling up to pick her up to head off to the university and just being so impressed with her. So that was a whole different thing. I was very excited. So was my son and my wife. So, but she never looked more ready to go than that day. So after the graduation part of it took place, we came outside of, they had a large tent they did it in, 800 kids. And we met her boyfriend, who she'd been dating only something like 5 or 6 months at that time. And my initial reaction when I met him and shook his hand was, wow, I'd never want to tangle with this guy. I mean, it was really foreboding. It was not good, not positive. I don't know. It's just a vibe type of thing. And I'm not usually one of these instinctual persons, but that one, I definitely got a big, whoa, what's up with this guy? So, and it wasn't that he wasn't trying to be helpful or anything, but so yeah, that got to feeling a little weird. I should mention one other thing, that even before the graduation, my wife had a conversation with my daughter, Kristin, and my wife said, tell me something about this relationship. And my daughter said, well, Mom, it's not the perfect relationship. And knowing all the things we've learned the hard way about dating abuse and domestic violence, we nowadays, of course, would have followed up with, well, if it isn't the perfect relationship, why is that? Or what would a perfect relationship be like? What's missing? What is that? I don't know if she would have answered that question or not, but that was an opportunity that got passed. So anyway, so as it turns out, the graduation day we never would have guessed was the last day we would ever see her alive. The day that we saw and met the boyfriend was that last day. And 20 days later, I received a call from local detectives. Now, I live outside of Baltimore. Kristin was in the Philadelphia area. We're about 125 miles apart. But I got a call from local detectives saying they needed to meet with me. They needed to tell me something, and it had to be in person, which I didn't understand at all. My wife and my son were not at the house. They said they had come to our house, which is where I am right now. And they said that we came to your house. There was no one there, came there a couple times. And so we need to meet with you. And I thought, well, I'll meet them at a grocery store because I'm not even 100% sure if these people are who they say they are. And, it's just so strange. It's a Friday evening. It's raining. It's June 3rd. It's 20 days later, so I'm not thinking Kristin at all at this time. I'm thinking something probably happened on our street. So it was outside a grocery store where I met up with them, and they showed badges and everything. And then they said, we regret to inform you your daughter Kristin was murdered earlier today by her boyfriend. And that is something. I mean, you just know things will never be the same again, and they haven't been. That's 19 years ago. So at that time, I just thought about all those things we'll never have. You know, those birthdays, those holidays, all those things, the get married part, hopefully to somebody wonderful, gone, grandchildren, all of that. It was all left to my son at that point, of course. But she was stabbed to death earlier that day in her apartment by this guy. We later learned that she was trying to break up with him, and obviously it went horribly. She kind of did everything wrong. She didn't know it. She didn't realize how bad it could get, nor did her friends. We can talk about some of that later on here. But anyway, so our family gathered at the house, and I had to break the news to my parents, who I'd seen earlier that day, and to my wife and son, Michelle and David, who came back from this graduation party they had been at. And I sat them in the family room and told them what happened. And of course, we all had a nice big cry. One of the things that hit me after we were here at the house for a while and thinking about it was strange. Sort of got this little teletype across my mind, which was what a huge responsibility it was about the way we handled ourselves, that as the news got out, people would be looking at us and wondering, are we going to go into a cave? Or are we going to shatter all over the floor? Or, how would we act differently? And I just said that to my wife and son after my parents left here. And I said that was really important, how you carry yourself, just be careful. And it also occurred to me in that first 24 hours, strangely enough, that somehow in the midst of such a horrible tragedy, that there's probably some kind of an opportunity in here somewhere to do something with this. The focus would be so much on us now, that so few people have this pinned on them. So anyhow, as it turns out, that turned out to be very true.
It's also pretty amazing and awesome that you had that ability in the moment to have takes a little bit of a detachment, almost objectivity, I should say.
Yes.
To be able to think about that, because the only thing you're granted is the opportunity to respond at that point. All that other choices were taken from you, but how you responded to it was you, and your family. You had choices still to do good.
Yes. I think one of the things too that was just the nature of what was taking place is that all of a sudden you had things you had to do. You couldn't put off starting to interview people at funeral homes. Where are we going to go with this? The next day, and it was raining on Friday night, but the next day, that was the night we heard about it. But the next day, I mean, it's a bright sun and it's hot outside. And I mean, we're walking in and out of funeral homes, and we're walking on cemeteries and trying to pick a plot, having to make all those decisions. And we don't know when they're going to bring Kristin's body to us, because at this point in time, her body represents evidence, strangely enough. So anyhow, it's just a complete nightmare. And
we forget about that. Those of us who haven't gone through that forget about
yes. I mean, I'm not going to try to make small out of anybody losing anybody.
Right.
But what happens with something like this is there's the immediate parts that are going to be the next week, let's call it, that everybody has to go through. But then after that, now we shift the focus at what are we going to do with the guy that did it, who the police are hanging on to at this time, and he's sitting in a jail cell. So that's really what the next 10 months or so were all about, is what do we do with this guy? So you got to figure he's going to prison, which he did. And I don't want to go through all the details of it just because of time, really. It's not that I'm afraid to or don't want to. I really want to, actually, but I won't.
Well, if there are things you want to say, though, say them. Just not looking to illuminate him in this story.
Yes.
No,
I'm not here to give him any publicity, negative or positive. Positive would be just about impossible, but if you speed up the clock from that point in time, there were a number of court appearances. They have something that's called a primary hearing. preliminary hearing, excuse me, where they bring him into court and basically, is there even a case here? And of course there is. So that's, that's easy. But we went to every last one. We were told by the prosecution team, you don't really have to go to every last thing. And we said, no, we really do. So we did. So Kristin was killed in early June. August was the preliminary. September was something called the formal arraignment, where they have a long list of things that they're charging him with. Some of them are a little bit on the fringes of what they could even get him for, but they're trying to hit him with every possible thing: 1st degree, 3rd degree murder, all these other things, weapon things, and some things that you don't even know what they mean. So we were told by the prosecution team that 95% of the time, people like this will plead out. It'll never wind up in a courtroom, and we found some comfort in that. However, the next thing we find out, this is towards the end of that year, is that he really does want this to go through the court. So we kind of ended up the year with that going on, that they wanted to buy more time. They wanted to look at some other evidence. This is the defense. They wanted to do other DNA testing and all, which, by the way, they never did. But they did get what's called a continuance from the judge. That dragged into the next year, so we're a couple months into the next year, and it's pretty much never land. It's any day you could hear an update or not, most of the time not. The prosecution team was fabulous, honestly. They took every call. They never hurried us on calls. It was pretty amazing from that standpoint.
That's amazing.
I know. Do
they have a victim advocate for you?
We did not have one, but I probably did not need one.
Okay.
As it turns out, I never even heard that term back in those days. I've heard of it since, and I know exactly what that is. But so what happened is they finally came up with another court date that was almost exactly the anniversary of the day he killed Kristin. It was going to be June 4th of that year. He killed her on a June 3rd. And with the new date, although his lawyer, the court-appointed lawyer, wanted him to go into the courtroom, he decided to plead out. And he pled to 3rd-degree murder, which basically is 1st-degree murder is premeditated, 2nd degree is murder committed while committing a felony of a different thing, like you're robbing a bank, and while you're in there, you kill someone. So you didn't go to kill someone, but you did kill someone. You really went there to rob the bank. That would be 2nd degree as an example. And 3rd degree is basically murder, but it's not 1st or 2nd. It's basically a big bucket that if it's not the 1st or 2nd, it's 3rd. So it's still murder. He pled to 3rd degree murder, knowing he would get 15 to 30 years in prison. So we finally, by April of that next year, roughly 10 months after it happened, he pled out. He got 15 to 30. Off to prison he went. So he went from a jail situation to a prison, and he is still there. Now, if you do the math, it's now 2024, and his first parole review was 2020. They refused him, said, see you next year. When the second one happened, they reviewed him, and they decided to make it a year and a half for the next one. And when they did that one, which was June 2 years ago, they decided to make the next one 3 years later. They kept adding time to these, which is fine with this family. So at this point, he has been in prison in one way or another just over 19 years, and will do at least 20 years. And then it's kind of see what happens. It is totally up to a 5-person parole review board. They make the decision, and it's basically best of 5. I mean, it's basically, 3 out of 5 people vote one way or another. He's either doing another year or more, or he's out. So that's enough about that guy. Let's see here. So if you want, Lisbeth, I can kind of head towards what I have done since this is all happening.
I'd love to know how you and when you began the journey that you're on today.
Yes.
Be great.
It was very fortunate that about 5 months into this happening to Kristin, we were asked to come back to her school in November of that year, still 2005. Come back to her school and to go to a memorial service, kind of these candlelight vigils. You walk around with candles and say prayers, and it's a whole stream of people walking around. So we did that, and we were told that if we wanted to get up and say something, we could. So I said that to my wife and son, and each of us wanted to do that. And so we had that all set up. I also did about a 5-minute video about Kristin. Again, I was a creative guy in the advertising business, so I could do things like that. So I put together a video, we played it, and then my son spoke, my wife spoke, and I spoke. And one of the remarkable things about it that was really amazing was that when other people had spoken before us, you got the kind of typical people shuffling in their seats, probably 200 people in the chapel, but people moving around or getting up or somebody coughing over there. It's just the normal, kind of like if you're at church, people stir around a little bit and maybe drift a little bit. When we got up and did our talks, that place was quiet and people were transfixed on each of us as we did this. And I thought that was really important because they really wanted to hear it. Nobody wanted to talk to anybody next to them. It was like, be quiet, I'm listening to these people. And afterwards, we were told how powerful it was and how great it was, and that we had learned by that time a little bit about dating violence and domestic violence, intimate partner violence, but had a long way to go. And people encouraged us to do more of this. So I was asked to get up and speak at different things, and would kind of keep it pretty short, mostly because I was a bit anxious about what happens when you get to the end and you're standing there and people want to ask questions. And you're thinking, I am so not qualified to get into the deep, dark questions. So I always would have a domestic violence counselor or somebody standing by, but I felt like a baby sucking his thumb up there. It's like, oh, I can't handle these questions. This is beyond my ability. So I just thought, well, look, if you're really going to do something with this, if you're going to take this opportunity, as I said back before, you better start doing your homework. And so we started making friends with domestic violence agency directors. We also had a foundation that started. Some friends of Kristin started a foundation, and one of our board members was a domestic violence agency director. So I was all over her. It was like I couldn't ask enough questions. And she did beautifully. She handled it wonderfully. So I got to that point where I was really looking forward to do it. And probably at this point in time, I've done well over 200 speeches, I'm sure. Then another thing that came along, and it didn't happen immediately. It was about 10 years after Kristin was killed. I was thinking about, where does it all go from here? Because I would get asked to get up and give a speech, but I couldn't make speeches happen. And I wasn't out running around saying, hey, can I talk at your thing? Can I do? So it occurred to me that I had some time. Like, I would get into work really early some mornings. I'd have this quiet time. And on LinkedIn, I would write articles about how to avoid a parent's worst nightmare. And the great thing about LinkedIn is I had a ready-made audience, but I also didn't have someone stopping me or editing me or saying, you can't put that on here. I wanted to see what people's reactions and comments were. And they were positive. It was like, wow, pretty brave of you to write this, or this is really important stuff. You ought to do more of this. So I probably wrote about 15 of these, and I was very encouraged by what I was getting back from people. And at that point thought, well, oh, yeah, that's right. One person's comment was, why don't you stop writing these short stories and just go and write the book? And I thought, got something there. So it turns out that was 2015. At the end of that year, I actually retired. And I thought, well, you don't have any excuses now. You have as much time as you want to take. So I started really throwing myself at the book, and I wrote the chapters I wanted to write the most, the ones I just felt the most ready about, like the night that I heard this about this horrible tragedy. That was really the first one I wrote. And I made a decision early on so that people would want the book and they would want to or be able to move through it and feel like they were rewarded by reading it. I was thinking about all those things I liked about some of the books I had read. One of the things my wife and I like very much are short chapters and also easy to read language. It wasn't the opportunity to show everybody your great vocabulary using words like pernicious, insipid, and I don't know, obsequious or whatever you could come up with. Even now, I struggle to remember what they mean.
Right.
But pretty simple language, and but also keep the story moving. Just constantly keep it moving. Just so the chapters might be 2 or 3 pages long, and then it's like a movie where it cuts now to something else. But in each case, I promise myself, you've got to be interesting. You've got to be interesting. Also promise myself this cannot be what I'll call a boo-hoo story. You can't write something. It's like, oh, now do you feel sorry for us? Ooh, now this happened. Bet you feel sorry for us now. And it's not the Pity the Mitchells book. It's meant to be a fairly objective, come with me story. I will take you by the hand. We're going to see what it's like to get the word from detectives about this horrible thing that happened. Then you're going to go to my house, and I'm going to be there with my parents and my son and wife and tell them what happened. And now the sun comes up and it's hot the next day, and we're going to go to funeral homes, and I take you through all that stuff and all. And I mean, we're down to the point where we're picking out the coffin, the casket, and even in the midst of that, trying to, and maybe this is just me, just trying to lighten it up here and there because it's so tough. I think I have a line in there that says some of the effect of, I don't know about you two, but I really don't want to be here, and it's like, you gotta be kidding me, but it's like,
People don't get that if they haven't gone through a tragedy. And some people don't who have, but I think if you cannot add levity, you're just going to seal your own fate. And
yes, people are going to drop that book. Yes, they're going to drop the book at some point because it's like, you know what? Every time I pick up your book, I'm miserable. I wasn't trying to do that to people.
Right. Exactly. Good job. I mean, but that's also neat that you remember that things. I don't know about you, but I'd really like not to be here.
Yeah, I really don't want to be here. Yeah, I remember my wife at some point says, I wonder what kind of casket Kristin would like. And we both looked at her like, she would like a casket? Like anybody would like a casket. So the book took just about 5 years to put together. I will say I did not work on it every day. I wasn't always sure it would ever get out somehow. I struggled with whether to be a self-published author or to try to get an agent. I read enough about trying to get an agent to know that is like throwing darts at a dartboard with a blindfold on, that you might hit it now and then, and then we have to even if you get an agent, you have to kind of now see if you can get a publisher, and now all of a sudden the publisher's editor is going to like beat the living stuffings out of your book. And plus they don't really want to hang out with first-time authors because every time they say they suggest a change that you're going to cry.
Because people do that.
Yeah, you can see how they're like, we need more of this, or you need to drop that chapter, or we're not going to publish the book.
Right.
So I decided to go the self-publishing with Amazon route because I was in my family, we were the kind of boss of what was going to be in it and not in it. So hopefully making good choices. I did hire an editor to go through it too. But anyway, the book took just about 5 years. It would have come out a little bit sooner, but if you do the math, we actually ran into COVID. And so about the time I was ready to hit the publish button, COVID was all over us in 2020. I was ready in maybe March or April. That's exactly the wrong times. But it really, at the end of April, early May of 2020 is when I hit the button. And once the book came out, it sold like crazy. And I was pretty happy about that. Of course, you look at the first month and think, wow, if this happens, this thing's going to be 1 million books. Well, the first month was the best month, let's say. But the other thing that happened is once the book was out, it was a lot like losing a companion I'd been hanging out with for 5 years, that I was always coming back to the book and working on it and changing things and moving things and wondering what to do with this or how should I express this. And just so much attention in this one place, just interacting. And then all of a sudden the book's gone. I mean, once you write the book, you don't keep writing the book. So then I thought about, well, let me go ahead and turn it into an ebook. Now, when you self-publish, you either you either have to format it or you have to get someone to do it for you. And formatting the ebook from what I already had was another complete nightmare. It was just, I goofed that up so badly. I should write a book on everything you shouldn't do, but writing a book. So, but anyhow, the ebook finally got itself out. And once that was out, it was like, okay, now what? And I realized the one thing missing here, because some people had asked me, how about doing an audiobook? Is this ever going to be an audiobook? Because some people say I have a long commute. I can't really sit around and read a book.
Right.
I'll never get through a book. So I interviewed some voiceover people and some other people who put audiobooks together. And I kept thinking, how strange will it be to take such a personal book and have someone else's voice telling this? When you get down to these really personal moments about my daughter when she was a little kid, or maybe the first time I walked into the apartment where she was killed, I'm going to have someone else putting on the emotion that I have in those words that I used. I thought that is just too strange. So I thought I'm going to take what I consider to be the toughest chapters for anybody to do, and I'm going to try them myself, just do them on my computer, edit them some, and just see how it sounds. And I thought, it isn't that bad. It's not that bad. This might actually work. So I went ahead and just did the whole audiobook myself. And the big value of doing that and getting that out was it satisfied some people who wanted it that way, but it also got me very much used to just speaking into a microphone and editing, so that next the idea was, well, if I ever thought about doing a podcast, I guess I learned all this other business. I guess I could learn the techniques and technical stuff about that. So I did it. I went ahead and started a podcast. And so that's been around for about 3.5 years now. It's a 2.5 or 3.5. I lose track sometimes, but.
And remind us of the title, please.
Yes, that's a good point. The book, just about everything is When Dating Hurts. The book is called When Dating Hurts. It's only on Amazon. Again, it comes in all flavors. It's paperback and it's ebook and it's audiobook. And the podcast is also When Dating Hurts. And you can find it on all the podcast players, all the popular ones. And also my website is whendatinghurts.com for what it's worth. And you can find all those other things if you go there. So just remember those 3 words. Of course, on the website, they're all strung together. So in this point in time, the podcast has 1.25 million downloads total. So that to me is not so much an ego trip, a wonderful ego trip that I'm having. That's not really the point. The point is that so many people have listened to, because you have downloads, but then you have other people who are streaming. Downloads and streaming are 2 different things. So a lot of people have listened to the When Dating Hurts podcast. In the very beginning, I had subject matter experts on there. So I would have domestic violence agency counselors or directors. I'd had detectives. I had policemen and women. I had mothers of survivors, mothers of victims. And then the big breakthrough was this. I actually asked a domestic violence agency, a couple of them actually, if they could give me survivors who would come on and tell their stories. And in both cases, when I asked 2 different domestic violence agencies, in both cases, they kind of, for the most part, slammed the door on me on that and said, you know what, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to help you with that. It's not that I don't want to, but we don't want to participate in re-traumatizing somebody, having them go through the worst things that ever happened in their lives. So I don't know, if you want to do that on your own, fine. So I was fortunate. I was on a couple large podcasts, and I would finish up by talking about my podcast, much like I just did on yours, Elizabeth. And so that actually opened the door for me of people coming to me and saying, I went through this horrible thing with this man, or in some cases, it's a man talking about his wife, or I have a woman who went through a horrible thing with another woman. In fact, this one just ran recently. She's in Australia. I've had a number of Australians. I've had Canadians. I've had English women. And I had somebody in Zurich come on and tell her story. I've had people from around the world. And of course, we get downloads from around the world. But yes, it's gotten to be a bigger deal than I ever anticipated. I didn't know what level of acceptance I would ever gain from people. I could have pictured some people saying, "I'm really sorry about your daughter, but we've heard about enough from you, and go grieve on your own," or "You're not an expert. How dare you?" I didn't know really how the acceptance would go. As it turns out, the acceptance has been wonderful. So yeah, it's been great. And just wanted to insert, the only statistic that I ever use, or I try to keep statistics to a bare minimum because I've been to enough talks where people will just bore everybody to tears with that. They go through all these things and, that 47% of this. And I'm thinking, well, it's just about 50-50. You're not really telling me anything. Or people rattling off the names of websites, to the point where your head's spinning. But the one statistic I use to emphasize that it can happen to really just about anybody is that 1 in 3 women will suffer physical abuse or physical violence, in this case, at the hands of an intimate partner at some time in their lifetime. And that it typically happens to women between 16 and 24, but can happen to any woman at any age, at any time. So I've met people who are 12, and I've met people in their 60s at this point in time who've told me their horror stories. And the only fortunate part was that they were out of those relationships and they had learned where they went wrong. So that's an important statistic. And I should also add that in terms of physical abuse against men, it's actually 1 in 4 men, which is still, that's pretty remarkable too, I think.
Okay.
There are a number of guys who could be 6'2" and their wife is 5'4", or their significant other, and it gets physical and they feel like, I'm never supposed to hit a woman, and they just kind of take it and they don't want anybody else to know about it. It's, of course, all of this is just embarrassing and it's just so awful, so insidious. So why don't you talk for a while?
Well, you brought up one thing, and I just wanted to clarify, because you said, you talk to people who have the opportunity later to look at, what did I do wrong, or what signs did I miss?
Yes.
And when I was working as a domestic abuse survivor advocate, back in the day, this was a long time ago, but we were very careful never to blame victims. But on the other hand, that's far different than saying you had nothing to do or nothing to learn from this experience. There's much to unpack and to learn from the experience. And there are often, not always, signs that people have missed, or intentionally not even realizing it, but intentionally sometimes even overlooked, because they want the relationship to be what they needed it to be.
Oh, yes, that's a good point. Very good point.
And so they're not like they're trying to lie to themselves, not intentionally. But sometimes we get to a point where we just don't need this truth, this person, this dream to be the thing. And so we overlook a whole bunch of signs that may have been helpful. And I adore that you have now a podcast, a book, and presentations you've done on helping people know the signs of dating violence. And I don't think we can go over all of them now, but
yes,
if there are a few things you want to rattle off before we talk about your daughter herself, because I don't want to neglect that this is her moment too.
Yes. Okay. That's fabulous. Yeah. I'd love to go through the list. I could tell people that if you do get my book, you will find them. And I just tuned them up just recently. The key to the warning signs is they all fit under one big umbrella, which is that it's one person exerting power and control over another person. So if you let your mind wander what that might look like, but it's somebody who is very jealous, very possessive about what that other person does or says or how they look or who they hang out with. Somebody who goes out of their way to isolate you from your family and your friends and things you like to do. In the very beginning, you're not going to see this in a relationship. No one's ever going to act on the first or second date the way they're going to act at the 20th or 30th date. You're probably not going to see the bad part of it, the really disturbing part of it. But it's the type of thing where someone comes up with maybe a name they call you, that's kind of a dig at you, or look they give you sometimes. It's that look which is like, are you doing that? I can't believe you're doing that. And you're like, oh, better stop, better stop. That's when you're really being controlled by somebody else. Somebody who, when you're away from them, is constantly checking up on you with phone calls or text messages. Some people call that blowing up your phone. But there's some people who get as many as, 60 or 70 text messages in one day. Well, what are you doing now? What are you doing now? You said you're going to go to the mall for an hour and a half. It's already 2 hours. Where are you? You say you're coming out of Macy's. Why don't you turn around, take a picture of the Macy's sign and text it to me to prove where you are? And if you do it, let's face it, you're controlled. And the list can go on and on. It's just that the people who do this, the people who abuse other people, they know how to get you in the very beginning. It's the storybook romance part of it. It's where things are just like fairy tale wonderful, maybe like, wow, I'm going to the most wonderful places, and this person seems to say the right thing. Well, that's because this is a practiced act that's taking place. This person's tried out on other people different things and found different ways to come on strong. It might be somebody that after you go out for the first time, and then you maybe, if you're working, you go into work the next day, and that person is sending you 2 bouquets. I know of somebody who had that happen. So it's just thought, wow, I've just met the most wonderful guy. This is just so great. No one ever did this for me before. Or buys you a puppy, and then every time you have an argument, tries to take the puppy away. And I mean that literally. That's a real thing that someone gave me. But somebody who lies about every facet of what's going on, you come to find out, like the guy that killed my daughter, it said that he went to Villanova and she was impressed by that. We found out afterwards that, well, he went to Villanova. He didn't graduate from Villanova. He did 1 semester and was kicked out for plagiarism. So it's somebody who's working you the whole time. They're working you. So the book talks about the When Dating Hurts book talks about the warning signs, and also talks about what I call the template that every abuser follows, which is only a 5-step template. It's very easy to remember. I guess the other thing too is I want people to understand that this really can happen to anybody. We don't fit that kind of cliched stereotype that I probably had in my head before this happened to us, where it happens in some rough part of town by people who don't know how to behave themselves, who come home from work, have a few drinks, and beat up their wife. This sort of cliched wife beater T-shirt scene that you might have in your head. So, we're living out in the burbs. It's a nice area here. My daughter came from here. She wasn't here when it happened, but she was in a nice area. She had a job lined up with General Mills. She was a graduate. She was really on her way in all kinds of ways. But the part missing was her parents, my wife and I, didn't know about domestic violence really, beyond the cliches and things, figuring it would never touch our lives. And of course it did in a very, very big way. But it can happen to anybody in any neighborhood, anywhere around the world. And by the way, let's just point at Australia. It's worse there than it is here.
And I saw today there was a particularly hideous case. I don't know if you saw that, with a number of children in a family murdered. That very, very tragic. Very tragic. But I feel like sometimes we hold on to these cliches because we don't want to think that it could happen to us.
That's a good point.
And I feel like too, with the school district, I remember we faced a lot of opposition back when I worked at a domestic violence agency until the murder of a celebrity. Then suddenly it was okay. The doors were open for about a year.
Yes.
We could come talking about whatever we liked. But, I feel like people want to keep it secret, keep it private. It's none of your business. And it's not. It's everyone's business.
It is. I mean, it's just so pervasive. You don't really get to decide whether to keep it behind closed doors. I do feel like the people are coming out more and talking about it. I think the Me Too movement had something to do with that, and other celebrities, the Johnny Depp, Amber Heard type stories, make it come out some, at least. But it's, if a woman's living on a cul-de-sac and she has found out that she has breast cancer, she probably pick a few different neighbors to say, look, I just got this test back. I feel like I need to tell you, but I'm dealing with this. So if you don't see me outside, or if I don't look well, this is what I'm going through. If she has an abusive husband, she's not going to tell anybody on that street. I mean, that is a horrible, embarrassing thing. She doesn't, I mean, there are people who don't tell their own twin sisters when they're going through these things. I know of cases like that.
Okay.
So,
And it's a very good point. There's so much stigma toward being a victim that so often people are insistent on being called survivors, which is fabulous, but still need to be able to talk about what's going on and get that help. And I think it's one of the reasons why domestic abuse centers and shelters are so important, is because there you can find someone who will respect your anonymity, will respect the fact that you're not ready to make a decision necessarily right away. You might go back to that person, leave again, go back to that person. Your sister will judge you. Your parents will be disappointed in you. No question. I would be, and I have gone through it myself. I've stayed in a shelter, but I know that with my daughter, and I had said to her, honey, you can always come to my house. And she didn't, I'd be devastated. But
yes.
there is a place where in theory, there's no judgment, but it's all about safety planning and information to make one's own best decisions. So,
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. And what triggered in my mind, I'm very glad you mentioned that, was that you yourself will never figure out the safest path out of this. You and your best friends and your family will never figure out the best way out of this. You really do have to pick up the phone, talk with the domestic violence agency, get a counselor, and work out your own safety plan. Some people call it an escape plan. I just saw one of those just recently, and this thing was 48 pages long. I didn't know how long it would be. I have to admit, I hadn't seen one before. My point isn't that it's a pain in the neck to get through. My point is it is so personal about you only. It prompts you in all these areas of things to think about. You might think, wow, I never thought about that. I never thought about that. Like different ways to save your financial life, let's say. Different ways to like maybe get another phone, and this is the way to go about doing it. So this other person doesn't know. If you're going to have an escape bag somewhere, something that you're going to keep, 'cause let's say you decide, well, I'm going to stay with this for a while longer, but they'll coach you on, okay, we don't think that's a really great idea, but you're in control. You decide. However, and this one woman said her escape packet, like those things in an envelope that she knew she wanted to get and bolt when he was looking the other way, she had hanging on the back of the refrigerator. So she could slip her hand behind there, pull this thing off, this little button or something they had behind there, and turn and hit that door and never look back. And that's eventually what she did do.
it's fantastic. That
Yeah.
is fantastic.
Yeah.
So
So
it's just,
the rest of us are never going to be able to figure out. I mean, this is 48 pages with a lot of areas to put in about your financial life and who your friends are and who to call and different other phone numbers, all these different things that it has to work for you. If you're 14, your escape plan, and you could have one at 14, is not going to look like a 24-year-old or a 34-year-old or a 44, 54-year-old. Come on. Your lives are so vastly different. So it has to match you and your circumstances and your abuser, for that matter.
exactly. And I loved that part about the work that I used to do, but the fact that that service is available in many countries and many communities. And frankly, after the pandemic, there are places online that help fill in the gaps for communities that don't have easy access to domestic abuse services. Let's see here. Let's talk about your daughter a little
Sure.
bit, because I don't want to talk just about her in depth, but in life, tell me a little bit about her and how do you keep her memory alive today? What are some neat ways?
Well, the one way that I don't do what I do with the podcast and all that to keep her memory alive. That if anything, it reinforces what happened. So it's not necessarily the happy highlight of my life, but it is something that I'm going to keep doing because I see how much it helps people. But I think that for her, when I think of her, I think of somebody who was so loyal to her family and so loyal to her friends. Just a wonderful person. We heard a lot of great stories after she was gone, those stories that you wouldn't have heard otherwise. I mean, just for instance, a roommate of hers was from California, and Kristen and this roommate, of course, are in Philadelphia, and it's snowing like mad. And this roommate had a part-time job at Starbucks. And so when she looked outside and saw snow coming down, she's thinking like, oh my God, I don't know how to drive through that stuff. So she's out at her car and had never scraped snow off her windshield. And so Kristen must have looked out. Now, this is like 6:30 in the morning. And Kristen went down there and said, look, don't even bother. I'll drive you there and I'll pick you up when you're done. Don't worry about it. I mean, that's a pretty good friend.
Yes.
Somebody who cared that much. She could have just rolled over and said, good luck, Lauren, but she was just a very loyal person. She had a wonderful sense of humor that was really hers. It was proprietary. It was her own. She loved animals. That we always have a couple of cats around the house. At the time that she passed, there were 3, and then we actually found one under a bush soon after that, and it had 4 for a period of time. But when I think of our cats, I always think of Kristen. And we also around the house, more so nowadays maybe than ever, try to think of funny things that she used to do. Or, Christmas time, she besides engaging so much, but she was always one that after everybody opened their presents, how it could be kind of a mess with wrapping paper and bows and boxes everywhere. For some reason, as a little kid, she just decided she was going to be the one. Everybody else stand back. I'm going to tidy the whole thing up, put them underneath and make a display out of it. Just really, really cute. A couple of things that we do is on the anniversary of her death, June 3rd, we always try to have pasta for the angels. That's something that she used to love to have, this wonderful Italian dish. So I have some of the recipe on that in the book, believe it or not.
Oh, love that.
And then on her birthday, which is August 24th, we always have steamed crabs, which is something else she absolutely loved. So, but yeah, I mean, her name comes up around here just about every day of the week. Her pictures are all over the place. I feel sorry. I feel horrible for people who go through something like this and they try to limit the exposure to it. Every time they see a picture of their child, they feel like they just taken another punch in the gut. It's not that I never have that. I do, believe me, it's hard. But we're trying to remember the great fun person that she was, who just happened to be our daughter as well. So, yeah.
I think that's an important point that you made too, is that time does not heal all wounds. And if a person does that to themselves, and that is a choice, to not talk about the painful thing, to not talk about their missing loved one, to not get any support, that's a choice. And it has very negative consequences on life's outcome. And
yes.
So I really thank you for talking about this, because I wish that everyone had permission and gave themselves permission to talk about their loved one, to find that right place, and to embrace healing. You don't get over it, but you may be able to incorporate it into something beautiful, just as you and your family have done.
You have to, grieving is up to each person. And I won't say that the 3 of us here at this house grieve the same way, step by step by step. I mean, my son, that next day when we were in the funeral home, the one we actually picked, my wife and I were there at a desk talking with the funeral director. My son was there. Then he asked if he could just kind of take a walk, go outside for a few minutes. And we said, sure. And once he was outside for about a minute, I thought, wait a minute, I need to keep an eye on him. I didn't want to, I didn't know if he was going to go out and do something permanent out there. You just don't know how things affect people.
Right.
We were so focused on what we needed to do. Our focus wasn't 100% on David. It turns out he was sitting near a swing. They happened to have like a swing set or something near there outside of this funeral home, or a bench at least. And I found out later on, and he actually talks about this in the book, that he made the decision, even as a rising senior in high school at that time, since it was June, that he made the decision that he wasn't going to let this change him, that he didn't want his identity to be that he's the brother of a murdered girl, murdered sister, and that he needed to be himself. And so that was wise. My wife is a very private person. I, on the other hand, am not like that. So every step of the way with the book or the podcast or the speeches, we've had to talk about it and kind of negotiate it out. And then eventually she gets to be more comfortable with it. And she sees all the good that it does. So now it's become a lot easier. But in the very beginning, she just was very concerned about opening up our lives to other people. And by the way, some people out there aren't always so kind. You know, some
Sure.
people can see that you're down and then want to verbally kick you around a little bit. You know, that
And that
does
is
happen sometimes. So
so much worse today, even than it was
Yes.
when your
Yes.
daughter was first murdered. It is so much worse today. There are people who make it their career to troll other people.
yes. I've
So,
only had just really once or twice. Somebody wrote a comment that was basically like they couldn't believe I was making money off my murdered daughter.
worse. Thank you so much for your
So,
input,
You know,
sir
but
or ma'am. But yes.
yeah, I didn't actually answer that person back because I
Okay.
thought I just don't want to engage and have
Right.
I don't want a conversation with this person. But that has been really so tiny that it's almost zero. You know, and of
Wow.
course I appreciate that very much. People have really embraced it. And I do think most people see that I'm trying to help them. I'm not trying to just soothe us here at this house. So
Right. Right. And I love you pointed out we all read differently and respond differently. So I'm glad that your family still was able to do all of that together.
yes.
And I'm sure it was inelegant at times, but it happened. And that's the
Yeah.
main thing. Okay. That's just how it is.
Yes.
To remind us one last time before
Sure,
I
please.
pause, where can we connect with you? Give us your website.
Yes. So if you head to whendatinghurts.com, you can catch up with me. My email address is billmitchell@whendatinghurts.com. And the book is whendatinghurts.com. The website is whendatinghurts.com. Let me start again. Do you edit this?
It's okay. We don't need a perfect conversation.
Okay, I'm sorry. I keep saying the dot. I keep adding the .com to everything. The book is When Dating Hurts. The podcast is When Dating Hurts. And whendatinghurts.com is my website.
And we would have all figured that anyway. So don't worry. Thank you so very
Oh,
much.
this
for
is
being
great.
here.
Yeah.
I really appreciate you.
Yes. Thank you for this platform. This is great. And I do appreciate everything you're doing. I mean, you and I both know that you have to kind of work the calendar and you got to show up and you got to do what you do and put it together and everything. And I think you're doing a wonderful thing. I enjoyed listening to your podcast. So
Thank you. Thank you
Yes.
so much.
yes.
We hope you've enjoyed this week's show. Thank you so much for listening. Now, to find out more, head on over to lameredith.com and be sure to hop on the mailing list too. If you've enjoyed this show, please leave a rating and review or share with a friend. And if you really, really liked it, go ahead and subscribe so that you never miss another episode. We'll be back in 2 weeks with another episode of Persistence U with Lisbeth.